Her life was defined by routine, a desperate architecture of control built to contain the single, terrifying truth about herself. Before sunrise, Elara stood in the empty living room, floorboards dusted with talc. Her movements were not dance, but obsessive postures held with excruciating slowness. She sank into low stances, holding for minutes. Her breath was steady, a quiet hiss. She aimed for stillness, to contain the immense kinetic potential beneath her skin. She felt the tight ache in her joints and fought to keep it contained. She was a living pressure cooker, her existence dedicated to maintaining the seal. A sharp metallic clink from the kitchen pulled her from focus. She straightened too fast, startling even herself. It was just the alarm clock, but the sudden sound always felt like a crack in the glass. Oakhaven High School was a brutalist concrete block from the 70s, painted in aggressive beige. The hallways magnified every sound. The scrape of shoes on linoleum, the thud of lockers, the distant roar of students. Elara moved like a ghost trying too hard to be solid. She wore heavy muted clothing to hide the dangerous definition of her arms and shoulders. Her posture was apologetic, designed to deflect attention. 3 weeks as a transfer student, and she had performed flawlessly. Precise answers, quiet lunches, closed body language. She almost blended in, until Jaxon. Jaxon Thorne was her opposite. Loud laughter, casual violence, unearned confidence. The star quarterback, sculpted by protein and privilege. He moved like a battering ram, flanked by Mark and Trevor, who laughed on delay. Elara walked toward the library, books clutched to her chest. "Hey, textbook queen!" Jaxon blocked the hallway. His smell, expensive deodorant and stale locker room air, was overwhelming. Elara's breathing tightened. The resonance stirred. She anchored herself through her feet. "I heard you skipped the study group for Trig," Jaxon said, feigning kindness. Mark and Trevor hovered. "I understand the material," she murmured. "Oh, she understands the material," he mocked. He grabbed the canvas strap of her dress. Her grandfather's voice echoed. "Never permit another's hand upon your vessel." "Let go, please," she whispered. Jaxon smirked and tugged. The old stitching tore with a sharp rip. The strap ripped free, her dress sagging off one shoulder, exposing a thin white undershirt and pale skin. Laughter erupted from Mark and Trevor. Students stopped, forming a semicircle of phones and gawking faces. The shame suffocated her, not from the torn dress, but from the violation of her private architecture. Something broke. The mental dam failed. The Kinetos flooded her limbs. Her breathing stopped. Her eyes snapped up, fear replaced by icy clarity. Before Jaxon's triumphant smirk could fully form, Elara moved. Not a punch or shove, a small, precise motion, like swatting a fly. Her rigid middle finger struck the side of Jaxon's neck, where the carotid crosses the vagus nerve. The impact made a soft tick. Jaxon's body shut off, eyes wide then white. He collapsed with a heavy thud. Mark and Trevor froze, laughter dying. They stared at Jaxon's inert form, then at the slight girl with the torn dress. Elara felt the dangerous resonance blooming from her palm, radiating outward. It felt good, too good. She had to leave the physical signature of the strike. She didn't run. She walked quickly through the silent crowd, eyes fixed on the exit sign. Behind her, shock shifted to panic. Someone knelt beside Jaxon, calling his name. Elara burst into the cold Oakhaven air. Pine and iron sharpened her senses. She knew she had permanently altered him. She had only meant to stop him, stop the laughter, but fear and rage had overloaded the strike. A distant siren rose. Elara kept walking toward the trees at the edge of campus. Her mind raced through the consequences of the power she had unleashed. The resonance hung behind her, a vibration detectable only to certain people, and those people would be coming for her. The town of Oakhaven was perpetually damp, a gray, moss-choked secret tucked deep into the Cascade Mountains. It smelled of wet pine needles and old iron. Every sound was muffled, the low rush of the river, the whisper of rain, the deliberate silence of the town's insular population. Elara lived in a cabin 6 miles outside the town, accessible only by a single, crumbling gravel road. The cabin, built of dark, heavy wood, seemed to swallow light, She chose it for its distance and silence. Elara did not stop until the paved road turned to gravel, and the scent of human habitation was replaced entirely by the musty, cool breath of the deep woods. She reached her cabin an hour later, the torn shoulder strap of her dress dangling uselessly, a constant, abrasive reminder of the rupture. The siren she had heard had faded into the town's interior, but its memory was sharp, the sound of a net tightening. She worked with manic efficiency. The routine of escape was as deeply ingrained as the postures of Kinetos. First, the fire. She gathered all the paper, notes, textbooks, the single printed photo of her and her mother, and burned them in the cast-iron stove. The heat felt comforting, a clean purging. Next, the backpack. Cash reserves, dried food, a heavy woolen blanket, and the single weighted training wrist guard. The only piece of equipment she kept. But she didn't leave. Not yet. She sank onto the cold floor, placing her hands flat against the worn wood, searching. The floorboards offered no answer, but in the deep, hollow silence of the cabin, she could feel the faint, irritating ping in her own nervous system. It was the echo of the strike, the somatic feedback loop of the unleashed Kinetos. It was too much. Her grandfather had drilled into her that the purpose of the technique was absolute neutralization with minimal force, a surgical disconnection. What she had done to Jaxon was closer to an energetic overload. The boy would not recover easily, if at all, and that violence had a signature, a footprint, the resonance. She spent the remaining daylight hours in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the inevitable consequences of that vibrational trace to materialize. Meanwhile, in the harsh fluorescent glare of Oakhaven General Hospital, Detective Miles Corbin watched the EEG monitor above Jaxon Thorne. The screen displayed a pattern of dull, sluggish waves, a flat line interspersed with occasional, meaningless spasms. Corbin was not from Oakhaven. He was a transplant from the city, a man whose quiet demeanor was often mistaken for slowness. His face was a roadmap of past frustrations, etched around eyes that missed nothing. He had spent 20 years in specialized investigative units, and he knew a simple bullying incident when he saw one. This was not simple. Traumatic blow, non-penetrating, the attending physician, Dr. Chen, stated, adjusting her glasses. But the symptoms don't match the point of impact. His neck shows minimal bruising. If this was a chop, he should have whiplash, possible cervical damage. But his neurological state, it's like a massive targeted shutdown, like his system just decided to hit the off switch. Corbin didn't look at the patient. He looked at the sterile white wall. A single blow from a small, slight girl. She wasn't carrying a weapon? No, detective. The witnesses said she barely moved. The strangest thing is the CT scan. There's no major cerebral swelling. It's like the damage is internal to the wiring, not structural to the machine. Corbin nodded slowly. He had seen this once before. Years ago, an anomaly dismissed as an unbelievable accident. He left the hospital and drove immediately to the high school. It was late, the campus deserted, the air thick with dampness. He bypassed the patrol officers and went straight to the hallway where the incident occurred. The scene had been processed, taped off, and cleaned, but Corbin wasn't looking for fibers or blood spatter. He was looking for something that shouldn't be there. He knelt down where Jaxon had fallen. He didn't touch the floor, but hovered his hand a few inches above the linoleum. He closed his eyes and inhaled the stale air, the residual scent of cleaner, sweat, and something else. Something metallic and sharp, like static electricity just after a lightning strike. He waited, breathing in a slow, controlled cadence. Then he felt it. A profound, minute vibration in the air, a physical dissonance that seemed to cling to the spot. It wasn't sound, but a feeling. A low-frequency hum that tickled the sensitive bones in his inner ear and vibrated against his palm. The resonance. It was faint, almost completely dispersed, but it was there, like the afterglow of immense power. It was the signature he recognized from his previous, failed case. It meant the strike was not just powerful, it was engineered. The force hadn't just been applied, it had been transferred with impossible efficiency. "She's not a fighter," Corbin muttered to himself, rising slowly. "She's a weapon." Corbin returned to the station and spent the next several hours tracing the origins of Elara's relocation. The digital paper trail was almost insulting in its lack of detail. Elara's mother, Mara, had leased the remote cabin 2 months ago. No credit history, utility bills paid in cash, no social media, no public records. It was a perfect, clean slate, the digital equivalent of a pulled punch. He did, however, find one anomaly: a decades-old sealed police report from 3 states away. It mentioned a similar, unexplained incident that resulted in a debilitating, coma-like state and a peripheral connection to a man named Silas Volkov, Elara's maternal grandfather. The file was classified under an outdated administrative code used for organized crime, but Volkov's name was listed as person of interest, skilled. Corbin pulled up the mugshot of Silas Volkov. He was old, gaunt, with eyes that burned with a terrifying, cold intelligence. He was a master of a highly secretive, semi-mythological martial art, a discipline supposedly concerned with manipulating the body's internal kinetic energy, Kinetos. The image of the quiet, slight girl, the ripped dress, the impossible strike, and the lingering resonance coalesced into a chilling pattern. Elara wasn't running from a violent past. She was running from a trained legacy. He knew she would be fleeing the cabin already. He had to move now, before the trail went cold. It was just past midnight when Elara finally heard the vehicle approaching the cabin. Not a police cruiser. The sound was too muffled, too quiet. A dark, unmarked SUV, moving slowly up the uneven road. She had spent the last hour in the kitchen, carefully sharpening a simple chef's knife she found in the cabin. She was not planning to fight with it. A knife was an amateur's tool, but preparing it, the slow, rhythmic scrape of steel on stone, focused her mind. She was ready to execute the escape protocol when the vehicle stopped. The headlights cut through the window. A figure stepped out, tall, heavy coat, but his movements were deliberate, measured. He didn't announce himself or draw a weapon. He simply walked up to the porch steps, paused, and looked at the front door. Elara melted back into the shadows of the living room, her breath held. Her body was coiled, tight, waiting. The man didn't knock. He simply spoke. "Elara, I know you're in there. You left a signature, a trace. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here because I know what you did, and I know how you did it." It was the detective, Corbin. Elara's grip on the knife tightened, the cold steel digging into her palm. She didn't trust the calm. "That strike you used on Jaxon Thorne," Corbin continued, "it's the same technique used on my daughter 7 years ago. She's paralyzed from the waist down. The police called it a freak sledding accident, but I know what the resonance feels like." He paused, the silence stretching long and thin. "I've been hunting the person who did that for 7 years. I think you were running from him too. Your grandfather, Silas Volkov." He took a slow step back, his eyes fixed on the door. "I don't want justice, Elara. I want the truth about Kinetos. And right now, we are both on the edge of a very large forest. You're exposed, and I'm out of time. If you run, you'll just lead them right to us. You need my protection, and I need your explanation." Elara stood rigid in the darkness, her world fracturing. Her escape route was suddenly blocked not by an enemy, but by a man claiming a shared, crippling loss. She felt the cold reality. Her careful hiding had failed. Her exposure had drawn not only the law, but the shadow of her grandfather, the true master of the technique, the one who left permanent damage without remorse. She slowly lowered the knife. The steel scraped faintly against the wooden table. The silence of the cabin was now unbearable, filled with unspoken alliance and immense danger. "Open the door, Elara," Corbin urged, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We need to talk about what's coming." Elara did not open the door. She moved to the window, pressed her back against the wall, and slid the heavy insulated curtain aside just enough to see him. Corbin stood exactly where he had stopped, his hands visible and empty, held low and relaxed. He looked tired, not threatening. The damp, clinging cold of the Oakhaven night made his breath mist in soft plumes around his face. "If you call in the local deputies, they'll break the door down and handle this with a taser and cuffs." Elara's voice was low, strained. "I won't. They're slow. And they don't understand the resonance," Corbin replied, his voice still unnervingly steady. "I need you to confirm something. That technique, The one that hit Jaxon Thorne. It's called Kinetos, isn't it? Elara closed her eyes, the name a cold knot in her stomach. It's discipline. It's control. It's what my grandfather taught, then what I tried to forget. Discipline that leaves a 17-year-old boy in a permanent state of suspended neurological animation, Corbin countered. My daughter Sarah was 12. One day a sudden movement on the sledding hill. They called it a fall, but her spine was intact. Her nerves. They looked like they'd been hit by a focused electrical charge that vanished instantly. And there was a witness, a homeless man, who talked about the air vibrating, about the sound of a distant bell ringing in his head. Corbin stepped closer to the door, his silhouette darker against the cabin light. I tracked the description of the movement, the stories of internal force arts. I found Kinetos in ancient texts and discredited police archives. And I found Silas Volkov. He was in the area that year. He was gone the day after Sarah's incident. Elara finally reached out and unlocked the heavy bolt. The movement was a surrender, an admission that the shadow was already inside the room. She pulled the door open enough to let Corbin step inside. The detective stepped into the simple cabin, scanning the space. The burnt ashes in the stove, the packed bag near the rear wall. He didn't comment on her readiness to flee. Jaxon, Elara began, wrapping her arms around herself, trying to suppress the deep, residual tremble of fear and power. I didn't intend to hurt him like that. He ripped my clothing and I panicked. I just wanted him to stop. And you used the suppressed strike, Corbin supplied. It's about precision, Elara whispered, demonstrating by holding her hand in the air, fingers rigid, her stance lowering imperceptibly. Transferring the concentrated kinetic energy into a specific nerve cluster. It scrambles the signal. It's meant to last minutes, hours at most. Corbin's gaze was intense, analytical. So why is Jaxon functionally brain dead? Why is my daughter paralyzed? Elara dropped her hand, defeated. Because the technique is not just about the strike, it's about the control of the reservoir. My grandfather taught that fear, anger, or even triumph, any strong emotion, can flood the strike. It overloads the signal. The technique doesn't just scramble the system, detective, it permanently fractures the foundation. Jaxon's condition was the result of her years of suppression finally shattering. This was the core of the midpoint twist. Elara was not running from the act of violence, but the consequence of her own fear, a fear that turned her into the weapon she despised. Corbin took a step closer, but maintained a respectful distance. Silas Volkov, your grandfather, he taught this to your mother, and she taught it to you. My mother was an apprentice. He was the master. He practiced Kinetos in its purest, most brutal form. He saw it not as defense, but as absolute, untraceable power over others. He called it the ghost in the machine. He taught that we were not merely moving energy, but forcing our will onto the physical laws of the world. She walked to the small table and pointed to a faint groove worn into the wood. He used to make me practice the strike on this table, hundreds of times a day. If I left a mark, even a microscopic dent, he would make me start over. The master leaves no trace, Elara. The ghost in the machine is never caught. That was his mantra. He perfected the art of destruction without forensic evidence. Corbin pulled a small, outdated cell phone from his pocket. He brought up the classified file photo of Silas Volkov. Is this the man who taught you how to kill without leaving a body? He taught me how to shut off a life without leaving proof. Yes, Elara confirmed. My mother and I left him 3 years ago. We thought we had escaped his teaching, but we were only running from his reach. The reason we moved to Oakhaven, a town with no surveillance and deep woods, was to vanish. Jaxon brought the attention back to me. No, Elara, you brought the attention back to him, Corbin said. He taught you that the Kinetos strike leaves a resonance, a vibrational echo. He is the only one I know of who would be capable of sensing that signature from a distance. The implication hung heavy in the air. Elara's fear-driven strike on a high school bully hadn't just incapacitated the boy, it had sent a distinct, high-energy signal, a flare directly to the man she was hiding from. He knows where I am, Elara realized, the air growing instantly colder. He knows where the signature is, and if he comes here, he won't be looking for justice or revenge, Corbin stated. He'll be looking for you to discipline you for being sloppy and he'll be looking for me to eliminate the only witness who knows what the resonance means." Corbin looked around the cabin, then back at Elara. "He's been drawn to the site of immense kinetic discharge, the school. We need to go back to the source." Elara stared at him, bewildered. "Go back? To the hallway? That's insane. It's the only place he knows the exact coordinates of the blast," Corbin insisted. "He won't attack you here. Too risky. He will attack you where the energy is most familiar, where the sound of the strike is still humming in the foundation. We need to lure him out into the open, away from any civilians, and then we need to neutralize him." Elara shook her head, trauma resurfacing. "I can't fight him, Detective. I'm not strong enough. He's faster. He's controlled. If I fight him, I'll end up like Jaxon. Or worse, I'll end up killing him with the same overloaded force. That's why I stopped practicing." "Then you have to learn to absorb the force, not return it," Corbin said. "7 years ago, I failed to protect my daughter from his shadow. I won't fail again. I can't fight him, but I can use my specialized surveillance equipment, dampeners and noise suppressors, to interrupt his ability to sense the fight. I can give you the window, but you, Elara, have to face the ghost in the machine and learn how to silence the resonance forever." Elara looked down at her hands. "They taught me how to destroy the human nervous system," she said, looking up, eyes steeling with chilling clarity. "I know his weaknesses. He only knows offense." "Good. Then we use the school hallway as our battleground," Corbin confirmed, turning toward the door. "We will be setting a trap for a shadow, Elara, and we have until dawn." The plan was a desperate gamble, relying entirely on the predictable arrogance of Silas Volkov. He was a master of Kinetos, an artist of untraceable force, and he would assume his granddaughter was still an amateur, fleeing in terror. He would return to the site of the strongest resonance, the high school hallway, to clean up the loose end and eliminate the witness. It was 3 a.m. The school was a dark, cavernous space, dominated by the rhythmic thump of the industrial HVAC system. Corbin and Elara had returned to the beige hallway, the location sealed off by yellow police tape that now served as their perimeter. Corbin had brought 2 pieces of equipment. The first was a military-grade spectrum analyzer designed to detect seismic shifts and localized energy spikes. The second was a bulky silver briefcase containing the dampeners, experimental sonic emitters meant to flood the area with subtle, disruptive frequencies. Corbin set the dampeners around the site of Jackson's fall. "These won't stop him, but they'll muddy the field," he whispered. "The Kinetos master depends on perfect environmental silence to focus the kinetic transfer. This will make him sloppy." Elara stood 20 feet away, her torn dress replaced by dark training clothes. She placed her hands on the cold linoleum where Jackson's energy had erupted. She felt the residual hum, a low vibration beneath the surface. "He's not sloppy, Detective. He's controlled," Elara said. "His power is the ultimate paradox. Immense force with minimal movement. His mind is his weapon. If the dampeners work, they'll break his concentration. Then we wait for the ghost to arrive." They didn't wait long. The resonance detector began flashing erratic red lights. The needle spiked violently, then dropped, then spiked again. "He's here," Elara breathed. "He's moving in bursts, dampening his signature." The main entrance doors hissed open, revealing only darkness. Then a figure emerged. It was Silas Volkov. No uniform, just a heavy coat and polished black shoes. Old, gaunt, and impossibly still. He saw Corbin and Elara instantly and looked only disappointed. "Elara," he said, voice like sandpaper. "Sloppiness. You've let fear leak into your discipline. That boy is a catastrophic mistake. And bringing the police? An insult." Silas's eyes fixed on Corbin, who stood with hands raised. "Detective Corbin, a hunter of ghosts. You wasted 7 years on speculation. Now you'll waste the last 5 minutes of your life on a theory." Silas moved, not running, not walking, just shifting mass, gliding. He bypassed Corbin entirely. His target was Elara. "You left the family, you left the power. You chose fear over perfection." Silas struck first, a small rotation of his wrist. There was no sound but a visible ripple of focused air pressure shot toward Elara. She was ready. She used the absorption stance her mother taught her, dropping her center and relaxing the solar plexus. The invisible force slammed into her chest. She slid back 6 feet, gasping as the wind was knocked out of her. "Amateur," Silas sneered, "still deflecting the energy into the floor. You waste the power." Corbin seized the moment. "The floor is yours, Silas." He activated the dampeners. A sharp hiss filled the hallway, white noise clawing at the air. The frequency disruption overwhelmed Silas's sensory precision. He recoiled, eyes squeezed shut, fighting the interference. The resonance meter spiked wildly. The dampeners were working. This was Elara's opening. She surged forward, abandoning pure defense. "You taught me to stop the signal," she yelled. She closed the distance with rapid open-hand strikes aimed at Silas's joints. Blinded by interference, Silas blocked physically, matching her with perfect, economical motions. Their hits produced sharp clacks, bone on bone. Elara feigned a rib strike, then redirected into a finger jab at his shoulder. Silas blocked, but the pressure shifted his balance by a centimeter. That centimeter was everything. Silas countered with a horrifyingly compact move, a side palm strike meant to induce a localized stroke. Elara couldn't block. She moved into it. At the last second, she grabbed his sleeve and rotated her body, turning the lethal palm into a grazing blow. The force whooshed past her ear like a gunshot. Silas was exposed. She pivoted and drove her stiffened forearm into his torso beneath the ribs. A raw, kinetic collision powered by mass and speed. A sickening crunch. Silas gasped, his control fracturing under the pain. He staggered back, clutching his ribs. "You fought like an animal," he rasped. "I fought without fear." She pressed forward. Silas raised his hand for a final strike, but his focus was broken. Elara didn't wait. She dropped into a wide stance and slammed her heel into the floor, releasing her suppressed kinetos as a massive resonance pulse. A deep boom shook the hallway. The vibration surged upward through Silas's body. His eyes went wide. He screamed as his nervous system overloaded, collapsing in violent spasms. The master of precision was destroyed by raw, uncontrolled energy. The resonance meter flatlined. Corbin rushed forward, shutting off the dampeners. Silas lay trembling, discipline shattered. Elara stood over him, chest heaving, hands shaking from adrenaline. She had won, but the price was permanent. The silence that followed the boom was absolute. The industrial hum of the school's ventilation system seemed deafening after the kinetic warfare. Silas Volkov was still, his hands twitching faintly against the cold linoleum, the ghost in the machine trapped within a paralyzed body. Detective Corbin moved quickly, efficiently. He used zip ties from his kit, securing the master of Kinetos with professional detachment. He didn't look at Silas with triumph, but with a weary finality, the closure of a 7-year-long hunt. Elara stood rigid, the exhaustion settling in her bones like cold sand. The adrenaline was receding, leaving a deep, hollow emptiness. She looked at her grandfather, not with hatred, but with pity. He had been consumed by the very power he sought to master. Believing control meant absolute offense. Corbin approached her, his face grim. "He's alive, temporarily incapacitated. The paralysis will wear off, but the neurological damage is extensive. His ability to focus, to channel the energy with precision, I don't think that will ever return. His discipline is broken," Elara whispered, the truth a heavy realization. "He's just a man now." Corbin nodded. "What do we do now, Elara? The local police will be here soon. There's a wounded man, a teenager still in a coma, and you. Your story is impossible. You tell them the truth tailored for their consumption," Elara stated, her voice surprisingly firm. "Silas Volkov was chasing me, involved in a domestic dispute. I fought him off. Jaxon," Elara closed her eyes. "Jaxon was injured trying to stop the fight between us days ago. A separate incident. The medical reports say massive head trauma. They'll accept the cover story if the witness, you, is a highly credible detective who just captured a wanted fugitive." Corbin looked at the remnants of the dampeners and the quiet fury in Elara's posture. He knew the internal truth was infinitely more complex, but the external resolution was simple. He had his justice for Sarah. Elara had her freedom from the legacy. "I'll write the report. You leave Oakhaven tonight, completely. Your mother is waiting, I assume." "No, "I'm not running anymore, Detective," Elara said. "Running is how I broke Jaxon. I need to stay. I need to be normal, but with control. I have to live in the world, not hide from it." She took a breath. "Kinetos is a weapon, but its true purpose is containment. My power is my own now." The aftermath was a slow, carefully managed cleanup. Silas Volkov was transported away under an obscure federal warrant, his case sealed, the true nature of his power buried in classified documents known only to Corbin and the highest security bureaus. Jaxon Thorne remained in his state, a tragic reminder of the price of uncontrolled fear. Months passed. The dampness of Oakhaven gave way to a crisp autumn. Elara had returned to school. She still wore muted clothes, still sat alone, but her posture was different. Straight-backed, disciplined, alert. She was quiet but not invisible. She moved through the hallways with a new ritual. Her footfalls were deliberate, steady, light. She was practicing the final step of Kinetos, the silent step, absorbing all kinetic energy into her center, preventing any vibration or resonance from touching the ground. Elara stopped at the exact spot where Jaxon had fallen, where she had defeated Silas. The air no longer hummed. The space was inert. She took a controlled breath. She looked toward the parking lot where a dark, unmarked sedan waited among the pines. Detective Miles Corbin leaned against the fender, watching her. He was still relentless but no longer haunted. He visited Oakhaven occasionally under the pretense of checking on the sealed case. He raised a hand in acknowledgement. Elara responded with a slight nod, silent recognition of their shared secret, their uneasy alliance. He was the guardrail, and she was the controlled anomaly. She turned and continued toward the library. Sunlight cut across the floor, illuminating dust motes. Her walking was so controlled that it made no sound, no scrape, no thud, no resonance. She walked perfectly in the light, master of her power, leaving no trace behind her. The only sound was the whisper of wind in the Oakhaven pines.